Okay, so I think now we're getting into probably what you came for. And a lot of people are not quite interested in, history and ancient stuff. And Israel is such a thing right now that a lot of people are interested. Now, a few things I'm going to start with. Again, this is not a political, my thinking, or, this is part of the facts. I'm saying part of the facts because something that is important for us to realize is that whenever there is anything, there is many points of views to any situation. Right? A lot of times there's two sides to it. There's actually multiple sides to it. I'm going to give you a part of, I have an Israeli bias because I am Israeli. Right? I'm going to try and put that bias aside, but I am going to explain the Israeli perspective on a lot of these things. There is going to be, there is the Arabs, Palestinians, right? That the way they look at different things in history is different. I'm not here to say that their point of view is, it's meaningless or that they should just leave and go somewhere else, right? But what I'm hoping to help you see is that why is Israel in the situation where it is today, to help you understand Israel in the modern context, to help you understand that Israel is not just the nation, the physical nation. Israel is always a people, right? The people of Israel, they have a country that God promised them, right? But the people of Israel are not just those who have an Israeli passport. Right? I have an Israeli citizenship, a passport, I speak Hebrew. It does not make me more part of Israel than somebody who grew up here. We are all part of this nation of Israel. A lot of times when we say Israel, we right away think about the Israeli flag. We think about what's happening in the land. But what we see is that after the Holocaust, it takes time to realize that 6 million people have died. You don't find that out quickly. What you're finding out is that you can't find your siblings anywhere. What happened is a lot of families, most Jewish families, are large. Today, a little bit less so with the secular, right? But traditionally, larger families. Again, my grandpa was the oldest of his family, and you couldn't just take all of your brothers and sisters and move as a unit. They had to, a kid over here, 2 kids over there, anyone who would take them. To the Catholics' credit, I'm going to give them some credit now, they did take a lot of kids, Jewish kids, and hid them from the Nazis. Anna Frank, there's lots of stories, amazing stories of Christians who were persecuted because they took Jewish kids. But after the victory, right after the Nazis had to surrender, you are trying to figure out, where is my family? It's not like today I'll just get on an airplane, I'm going to go home, get in my car, going to go home. My grandpa ended up in Russia, right? And then he had to keep on escaping from place to place. And then even if you could go back to your home, you might find that the Polish family took your farm, that the Polish person took your business, that you are no longer welcome, literally. Right? Poland had the most Jewish people in Europe. The Jewish people were not welcome back, even if they wanted to go back. Me and my wife, we were in Poland, in Krakow. It has a Jewish quarter. There's no Jews there. We went looking, tried to look for them. Couldn't find them. This used to be a huge Jewish population. So you're finding out that 6 million are dead. It took years to find out 6 million. But you're finding out that I don't know where my family is. If you try to go home, good luck. And why would you want to go home? They just, anytime that the Nazis wanted you, yeah, here's a Jew. Right? You're not going to go back to that place. What is happening is you have millions of refugees. Millions. Right? What do you do with the Jewish people? Now, before we get into Israel, the land, we need to understand that there was mass migration, and this migration started before the Holocaust. Right? Some were lucky enough to be able to escape before. Right? We're just talking about different family members who were able to escape before it. Most of them had to leave afterwards. Mass migration. U.S. was a huge hub for Jewish people. Israel, as we'll see, was one of the biggest ones. Canada is a large one. They went all the way to Australia. They went to wherever they could have a safe place to live. Something else that we see past the Holocaust is that, again, atheism, right? So the idea of what do we do with this God, and the Holocaust. I want to talk about North America because we are here. Okay, a lot of times, again, we say Israel, we think the land. But actually, up to probably the 1990s, the U.S. had the biggest Jewish population in the world. That is significant to understand that Jewish life is not all Israel, right? There are 1.6 million Jews who live in New York. There is 1.2 who live in California. There's 750,000 who live in Florida. Canada is probably the third or fourth. It kind of goes back between Canada and France to how many Jewish people are in Canada. Toronto has 200,000. Okay, so that's the reason I live there. We have a lot of work to do over there. The Jewish people here in Canada are suffering. A lot of times churches don't realize that today Jewish people are suffering from all the anti-Semitism that they are receiving because people don't like Israel. A lot of these Jewish people they themselves are not supporting what's happening in Israel, but they take the punishment as a group of people. Montreal has 100,000. Okay, so it's the second biggest Jewish population here in Canada. Vancouver is the third. But we need to understand that, and this is something that I've learned. So I've been in Canada for 2 years. Right, we were living in Israel beforehand. We moved just a year after October 7th. I moved to Toronto, and I thought that being Jewish means being Israeli. Right, that we are the original Jew. We speak Hebrew. I can say the prayers and not have a weird accent. Right? That was my thinking. Oh yeah, it's all, Israel is being Jewish. And then I came and realized, wait a second. No. The traditions, the language, the food, is much greater than just what we have right now. Israel as a nation, we'll see coming up now, Israeli is actually a pretty new thing, right? What we think about Israeli today is a fairly new thing. Okay, the state of Israel. Now we're going to get into the state of Israel. There's going to be a lot of questions. That's we'll take time for questions as well. I'm not going to cover everything. 80. It's not even 80 years. Probably a little bit longer. Because what people don't realize is that a lot of Jewish people were starting to immigrate from Europe to Israel before 1948, right? But let's say the last 100 years, so much has happened in this land that I'm not going to cover everything. Okay, I'm not going to get into details of wars and massacres and all. I'm going to mention some things, but I'm not going to get into a lot of those details. Okay, so most people more or less know what Israel looks like. Okay, the Israel pre-1948. So 1948 is when Israel it was independent. the Turkish were the ones who were in control for a long time. The Turkish Empire. A lot of times we don't think about, but the Turkish conquered us as well. There we go. Another one, the Turkish.
400 years.
For 400 years they were in control of the land. Then the British took over. Now under Turkish and British law, when the immigrants or the Jews who were there, right? So my grandpa came from Poland, my grandma came from Russia, but her family lived in Jerusalem for over 7 or 8 generations already. Right? So my grandma came from Russia back when they were persecuting the Jews then. Right? So my grandma's family would have been in Jerusalem for hundreds of years already. It's important to realize that there were Jews there for a long, long time. Again, they were never completely kicked out. But what we see is under Turkish and English Empire, there is the struggle of not being able to buy property, to not having a citizenship, to not being able to, the immigrants, right? The British Empire actually were trying to stop mass immigration. A lot of Israelis would, or the world would like to blame Britain, right? They're another, villains today. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to see how do we please the people who are there. You have Arabs who have been there for a while, right? They are the Arabs who are there, just so we, Palestinians, they're not Philistines, right? Just so we, a lot of times people, we're from the Philistines, right? That's not it, right? The word Palestine, right? So back then it would be called Palestine. For me, if you believe in God, I would say let's use the word that He called the land, and not what the Roman Empire called the land, right? The Palestina, right, from the Romans, right? They were trying to punish the Jewish people, so they called Palestine. Back then, technically, it was called Palestine, but they're trying to understand how do we keep this tension, right? Migration. The Jewish people need somewhere to go. Countries were accepting them, but they couldn't accept all of them. And there's this zeal to go back to a country that we belong in, and a country that we can be safe in. Now, funny enough, Israel was not the greatest choice for safe, because what we're going to see is that there is a conflict that happens much before 1948. It is important to understand that the Israelis, or let's say the Jewish people of the time, and the Arabs are already fighting, not wars, but they're attacking each other in different ways. The hostility is there, right? The Arabs are hoping that the British Empire will give them control of the land, but they're seeing hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews coming in. It's important to understand this. For me, it's easy to say, well, the Arabs are blah, 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 blah. Right? For them, it's like the Jews are, but to understand that there is a conflict that is already happening, right? And it's not that simple, right? Yes, Voa.
A little bit just for clarification, knowing it was the Turkish, the Ottomans were finished by war, the first war, and the mandate was France and England.
Yes.
And the English and the French made a decision a year before 1949 to give because there's Arab Palestinians and Jews Palestinians.
Yeah, we'll get into.
A year before. And that's why 65% of the Jordanians are Palestinians.
Yeah, we'll get into. I'm just trying to help understand that these things are starting before 1948 or 1949, right? There's the conflict is happening, and we need to understand that there is. If you have been there, let's say for 300 years as an Arab, right? You have some generations, and then you're seeing mass, and then you have the English, the Turkish controlled it, the English are controlling it. What we need to understand is that with almost any conflict, especially that part of the world, there's many hands in that conflict, many hands. And we'll touch on those different hands, but it is important to understand that there is conflict already happening. The Hebrew language, right, so the Hebrew language that me and Dvorah speak, is revived, right? It is the only ancient dead language that gets revived and is spoken, right? So this is happening before, right? It is revived and it is starting to be introduced. Back then, is still you have all these people who mostly would speak Yiddish. That would be the common language, or those who speak Hungarian, in German, all these different languages. But they're trying to unify or create a language that is, again, based on ancient Hebrew but modern. And it's a huge work. It's really interesting to study this whole creation of the language, but it is a huge work to convince people to learn this new language, right? But the language is being reborn, and it takes time for it to really catch on, right? Today, if you go to Israel, you speak Hebrew. You learn the English, but you speak Hebrew, right? Back, my grandpa, he had to learn it. Right, he spoke Yiddish, he spoke German, he spoke Russian. He had to learn Hebrew when he went to Israel. My grandpa was in one of the boats that came, the migration, he came with a boat to Israel, and he came to a country that was in conflict, right? But he didn't have anywhere else to go. Something that is essential, sorry, well, you've been.
Who the conflict was between.
So we'll touch about the different hands that were in power, right? So unfortunately, what you see within this conflict, and it's not just this one, is that leadership, whichever that is, will want certain things, and the rest of the people don't have any say in it, and they are going to suffer the consequences of those things, right? So you have different. Back then, the Arabs were not a group of people. They were tribes, right, with different leaders, right, they were all fighting for power themselves, and they were fighting within, so it's not just like one individual, right? It is with Arabs, right, so between the Jewish people who were there beforehand and the new immigrants, and the Arabs. Now, the Arabs were not just one group of people. There were multiple, right? But we're seeing that there is a conflict with all, depends on where you are at, to who you're, but again, it's Jordanians, right? Jordanians, if there's someone to blame, the Jordanians should be blamed for a lot of things as well. But we'll talk about kibbutzim. Kibbutz, I don't know if you've heard the term. Dvorah, are you kibbutznik?
I was.
Okay, so...
You want me to tell you?
no, just which one?
Magan Michael.
Okay, so the way Israel, a lot of Israel was kind of populated, or how Israel had to become a nation was with small settlements called kibbutz. There were, let's say, there are communist settlements where you didn't really own, anything, but you got. It's actually communism that worked. Funny enough, now they don't exist. There aren't many true kibbutzim anymore. But if you go to Israel, you can still go and you can find places who run this way. So you have a job, right? The money that gets produced goes to the central thing. You have a house. You have whatever you need, but the kibbutzim are an essential part of the creation of Israel, because when the Jewish people go there, they were not allowed to buy. The Turkish Empire was, trying to get them so they can buy land. They had to buy junk land from Arabs, and they bought junk land and turned them into amazing farmland, because if you look at the Jewish people who came from Europe, they were doctors. They were highly educated, or bakery. If you go today to Israel, you're going to eat amazing cheese. Like the dairy is off the charts. The bread, that all came from Europe, right? The brains, the people who came from Europe with a lot of hard work, they turned. If you go to Israel, you'll be amazed by how much farming that land is blessed. You go to the desert and you see it's green, but the kibbutzim are really, Israel owes a lot of my grandpa went to a kibbutz. Now in the kibbutz, they got attacked quite often, right? Because they were kind of isolated. So part of your job, if you were there, men and women, is to guard, right? You had to guard. What you're seeing is you're seeing a creation of a defense force, right? You're trying to find a way to protect the people. Now, usually you don't create a defense force if you don't need defense. Right, so we need to understand that before any declaration of anything, right, there's a conflict and there is a creation of, it wasn't the IDF back then, evolves to the IDF, right, but there is a unified defense force. Okay, and we are seeing that there's going to be a fight for independence, right, there's a couple of characters that are extremely important in the creation of Israel. The first one is Theodor Herzl. Of course, Herzl. He's the beard is really like iconic, right? But in 1897, he is part of the first Zionist Congress, right? So the term Zionist is kind of introduced by this movement. Okay, Zionist today is a loaded term. I know the Zionist, okay, Zionist comes from the word Zion, right, or Zion, right? Is a very biblical term, right? And it is the long to be in the country. People kind of take it and say, this means that, Israelis don't want like they're just looking to kill everyone or to do this or, settlements and all these different things. Zionist just means, again, people can take it different ways, but we need a country where we can live, right? A country that the Holocaust will not happen to us. Right now, this is happening before that idea, because even back in 1897, the Jews were already being oppressed, right? This is not a new story, but Herzl is really important. The ideas that came from Herzl. David Ben-Gurion is iconic as well. The first prime minister of Israel. Okay, he has a really famous photo of him doing headstands on the beach. That was his thing. He did headstands in the hair. But David Ben-Gurion is probably regarded as, he was the first. He is probably when you talk about prime ministers, this is the guy that was part of the creation. Okay, now 1948, the declaration of two states, right? We're talking about the two states. The Arabs were supposed to get a piece of land, and the Jewish people were supposed to get a piece of land. What we see also in 1948 is going to be the first war, right? And I kind of said, this is probably not, I don't know if it's true, but the Israeli Jew is birthed somewhere around this, right? Being Israeli, right? It would be, I don't know when would be after 1948, which baby would be the first Israeli, or who got the first Israeli passport, right? But the idea of Israeli, right, is in the making. But we need to understand that the UN, right, they were going to do two states. Now, something that is important to understand is that David Ben-Gurion, he understood that as soon as Israel declares independence, that there is many hands who are going to want this to happen. Okay, Transjordan, or today Jordan, was a huge part in this whole thing. They controlled a lot of what we call the West Bank in Jerusalem. Right? So Transjordan is a huge player. Egypt is a huge player. Right? We have Syria. Now back then, a lot of those countries were not really independent countries. they, like Dvola said, the English and the French empires, I guess you can call them, they were dividing things up, right? So Lebanon is French, right? Jordan is English, right? So everyone is trying to control what's happening there. The U.S. have their interests, right? Different people have interests. And David Ben Gurion knows that as soon as they declare, there's going to be a huge war. He says to the Arab people, we do not want war with you guys. He said, we do not want war, because again, he knows that, and we need to understand that whenever whatever leader of the Arabs says, we do this, they go and do it, right? So again, David Ben Gurion, 1948, Dvorah.
Sorry, just that you did mention that the UN suggested 2 countries,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to mention that only Israel accepted it.
Yes.
The others say no.
Yes.
The
So
war began because they.
that's right. So the picture of the independence, 1948 happens. Like Dvola says, Israel agrees because they're happy to have anything, and they know that we can, maybe we can make this work. The Arabs say, and again, when I say Arabs, it's not like they had a vote, right? Like we need to understand, there's no voting. It is other countries who say no, right? And 1948, the War of 1948, or War of Independence, or whatever you want to call it, starts. Now, this map, a lot of times when we talk about Israel has so many enemies. I was going to make it bigger, but it just got bigger and bigger, the map. So I figured, we'll focus on like the main ones. We hear on the news a lot of different names, and even for me, I wasn't sure where Iraq was for a while. I kind of embarrassed about it, but because we just have so many. So I just wanted to kind of help understand, because this is going to be significant to where we are at right now as well, to help understand who is what and all the different names. Egypt, right? The yellow. We've had lots of, we'll talk about Egypt, but Egypt took part of the first war. Jordan is the brown or orange. Lebanon is the red. Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Yemen. Okay, Yemen is more lately. Saudi Arabia, let's say we're kind of friendly with them right now, but they also had they're not our biggest problem, thankfully. And there's many others over there. But we'll stay with the main ones. The Houthis are in Yemen. Okay, so that's why I'm talking about Yemen. Otherwise, Yemen is kind of... but interestingly enough, when you think about Jewish, a lot of Jewish people actually came from those countries. Right? So when we think about Jewish, we think mostly, white or European. Right? It's going to be Ashkenazim. Right? So a lot of Jewish people are Ashkenazim. They're from Europe. Yeah, myself, I'm probably sure you as well. Ashkenazim. There are Sfaradim. But Sfaradim is the word for Spanish. Right? But that is not really people who just came from Spain, but it is those who came from warmer cultures, let's say. Right? So you have people who came from Yemen, right? Temanim. There were a lot of Jews in Iran, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Egypt. A lot of them had to flee. They fled those countries, but there is still some Jewish presence in those countries. So again, when Israel declares independence, those countries still had a decent amount of Jewish people, right? So 1948, okay, we're going to see that there's a few different countries who decide, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, I think Iraq also had, and I think maybe Saudi Arabia also helped in some way. As we will see, 1948, Israel won. Okay, I mean, they kind of win most of them. And any time that Israel wins, now, before we get into that, there was a promise. There was a Jordan. The reason why I said Jordan is really, they're kind of like, I are not doing anything, but they actually have a big hand in this whole mess. Because the Jordanian king in that time told the Arabs, again, we'll go back to the map, but we need to understand that once upon a time, Jordan was actually connected. There was a huge part that was connected. There was no separation there. They were Jordanians. Right? People were, the Arabs were under the control of Jordan to some extent, right? And Jordan said, leave your towns because we are coming to attack Israel and we will kick them out. Okay, once the war is done, you guys will return. And that did not happen. Now, something that is important to understand, and I get to speak to quite a few Canadians about war and, because of what's happening in Israel right now. Thankfully, Canada has not been in war for a long time, and even the last war is Canada chose to take part of it, which is fantastic. Funny enough, I really owe, my life really to a lot of people Canadians and different people who went and fought in the Second World War, because again, probably my grandpa would not exist if they didn't, right? But when a country has not been in war for a long time, which thankfully Canada hasn't, people don't understand. They don't understand wars. And what happens is when we don't understand wars, and again, thankfully we don't. It's not like we should go to find one. Is it's easy to judge. Right? It's easy to from far away. Funny enough, I think when I met Katie, she's never met another Jewish person before. And there's a lot of misconceptions of, how do you get peace? Or what happens when there is wars? Or a lot of times you think a war starts, so you have to play nice. You have to, you should be as kind as you can as you are going to war. Again, war is a nasty thing. I don't think we shouldn't want wars. That's for sure. Wars are part of this world. And again, there is many things that happen in wars, right? So one of them was Jordan telling the people, the same thing with Egypt, right? They're saying, yeah, you guys leave, we will conquer, and then we'll give you. That did not happen. If you go to Jordan today, there is a huge amount of Arab, those are Palestinians, refugees in Jordan. Jordan will not give them citizenship, even though they got them in this mess, right? So we need to understand, as all these parts are moving, Israel went and they kicked people out, right? Because again, you need to be able to defend your people. A lot of times there's an idea of, why didn't they just talk about it? Or why didn't they just eat hummus together and, maybe, couldn't they talk before they did this? Well, they did. They did many times. As we will see that there were many conversations. And I believe that there were many Arab leaders who wanted to have peace. But again, there are greater powers who unfortunately have too much say into conflicts and they make a mess out of it and then they step back. And we will see that this continues. If something about Israel is that we have a lot of wars. We have had lots of wars. These are only part of the wars.
Maybe the one in 56 is important because the whole Sinai Desert was occupied.
And
Gurion gave it up.
yeah, the Suez.
1956. I was 4 years old, so I know.
The Suez Canal, is that what you're?
Is there what?
Suez?
It's called, no, that's Sinai. It was conquered. The whole Sinai Desert was conquered. The Americans said no, and they gave it with no conditions on it.
Yeah. So what's again? There's going to be many wars, and There's many mini wars. I don't know how you define wars in many, because let's say you had the 6-Day War, right? Probably one of the best known ones. That one is also, it's crazy. A lot of people that don't believe in God, I will tell them, with all the wars that we've had, with all the things that we've had, how can we think that there is nothing else? Like, it is insane to see what Israel has been able to do with limited sources, right? With people who came with they weren't military people, right? They're farmers, doctors, but they had to learn, right? 6-Day War, Yom Kippur was a brutal one. The first Lebanon War, the second Lebanon War. Go back to the pictures, right? So, like Dvolo mentioned, the peninsula over here, underneath Cairo, that's a Sinai Peninsula. Israel conquered all of that, and for us to have peace, we gave it back. So that little chunk of land, I think, is maybe 2 times, 3 times the size of Israel, right? Just so we understand how much they gave back. The same thing with every war, Israel conquered, right? Israel was able to spread. The Golan Heights, right? That's it. I don't know if you've heard this term or whatever. It's in the north of Israel, right? One of the wars, it used to be Syria, right? So, and Israel conquered it. They still control it today, right? And Hermon, yeah. So part of the Hermon. But what happens is every time the different countries attack Israel, Israel wins, and they're able to control land. Israel will hold on to the strategic land. Okay, because again, you need to go to Israel to understand how small it is. I think for Canadians it's hard to understand because just the province of Quebec. I mean, that thing is probably the size of probably most of this right here, or half of it. It's huge. When you go to Israel and you look at the West Bank and you look into Tel Aviv, you feel like you can probably throw a rock and get there. Right? The same thing with the Golan Heights. It's all of the mountains that look into the Sea of Galilee and all that area. So Israel, to be able to survive, people ask, why don't they just give it back? We have, as we will see, we have done that. And it sometimes it works, and most times it does not work. So Israel gave back the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. The countries that we, let's say, have peace with right now, by peace it means we're just friendly-ish, is Egypt and Jordan. Okay, so Egypt and Jordan, those are the countries that we have peace with. Now, how did we come to that peace? It was not by just talking and eating hummus together and just kumbaya and all that kind of stuff. Many conversations have happened, but unfortunately we had to have a few fights until they understood that every time they do this, they lose land, they lose. Right? Every time they do it, they lose. So Egypt and Jordan agreed to have peace. And I can go to Jordan, I can go to Egypt. I don't know how comfortable I'd feel at those places, but I could go there. But peace did not come from speaking. Now, we need to understand that every time these wars are happening, the Arabs they're always suffering from those things because Jordan attacks from this place, right, from Jerusalem, right, from, the West Bank. Well, guess where Israel is going to have to go to defend themselves? Into those areas, right? So anytime these things happen, the people suffer. And what we see is that there are the wars that are many, but in between there is atrocities that are happening. And there's atrocities that are happening to both sides, right? But there are things that, horrendous things that have happened continually between the different groups of people that continually creates hatred between each other. And we'll see pretty soon how that continues. But it is something to understand that probably, my mom lives in Israel, and back when she was, younger, she did not have the fear of, let's say, hitchhiking, right? She said, "Oh yeah, it wasn't a big deal." Today, you don't hitchhike. I mean, unless you're like a certain person, but you don't really hitchhike. It's a problem, right? When I grew up, we used to go to Arab towns, Arab cities, to go and buy stuff. My uncle and aunts, they would say, we used to go to the Gaza market, right? It used to be an amazing place. We need to understand that there was conflict, but within the people, between the people, a lot of times there was understanding of we can do life together. But what we see is every time that there's a war, the people are going to get hurt, right? And we're slowly seeing more and more hatred towards each other, right? A lot of terrorist attacks are happening in Israel. There are some Jewish people that go and would do atrocities in Arab towns as well, right? Small minority, but it's still there. We need to understand that in Jewish thinking, to go and, to a prayer place and go and hurt people, that is not a Jewish thinking. That is, anyone that would be a Jewish terrorist, we don't, as people, that is gross. That is not part of Jewish thinking. There are those who are very zealous, or let's say full of hate, that will go do those things. But we will see that the wars are happening between countries, and both Israelis and the Arabs are suffering because of it. There's a lot of talk about West Bank, right, and Gaza. Okay, and again, sometimes it's hard to visualize or know where those things are. So the Gaza is this right here. Gaza used to be part of Egypt. Okay, the West Bank is this yellow piece over here. And the West Bank used to be part of Jordan. This is where most of the Arab people live. Now we'll talk about Arab people a little bit. Okay. There are different kinds of Arab people in the sense of there is Israeli Arab. Okay, so probably a lot of people wouldn't know that there's Israeli Arabs, meaning they are Israeli citizens. There are cities where you have a lot of Arab people who live there, right? So one of them is Haifa. Haifa is all the way up in the north there. Another one is Jaffa. So Jaffa it's actually in the New Testament where Peter sees the vision, right? So that's Jaffa. Jaffa has a lot of Arab people as well.
That's Haifa. Jaffa is Haifa.
No. Jaffa is Yafo in Hebrew.
Where's Joppa?
Jaffa. I don't know what you call it. It's Yafo. So it's near Tel Aviv. They're connected. Yeah, Tel Aviv. Yeah, it's connected. A lot of Arab people as well. Jerusalem has a lot of Arab people as well. And something that is really important to understand is that you have Israeli Arabs that most times we live together pretty well. I say most times because we still have our problems. When the Arabs who have Israeli citizenship, they benefit the most out of all of the Arabs in Israel. People don't understand that the Israeli Arabs actually have the most rights. Women, if you care about women's rights, Israel is by far, not just in the Middle East. I mean, that's not much competition with women's rights, but right from the beginning, Israel was established by men and women working together on everything, farming, defending itself in all aspects. When you go to Israel, women and men are in all aspects of life. But what we see is that those Arabs who chose to be part of Israel as a citizenship, they by far benefit the most. A lot of times they actually have more benefits than me as an Jewish Israeli. They don't have to go to the military. They don't have to go to the military. I have to put my life in danger and to lose 3 years of my life, right, to defend them, right? Dvola probably as well. Like, that is a reality that they have in some ways. It doesn't mean that they have a nicer life, but they actually benefit hugely on Israeli business. We love going to eat there. They have great food. We love to go to those places as long as they're safe.
Another point of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Kfar Badim.
Mm-hmm.
I have more than 70 families, Arabs who bought houses in Kfar Badim.
Mm-hmm.
I'm half a kilometer from Tarshiha,
Mm-hmm.
1 kilometer from Neria,
Mm-hmm.
Fasuta, Horfesh, all of those, Fayanur, all those names, 5 surrounding my village
Mm-hmm.
are Israeli Arabs.
Yes.
I can't buy a house or live in one of them.
Yes.
And it's understood
Mm-hmm.
and they are protected
Yes.
as a community. But
Yes.
if I'm an Israeli,
Mm-hmm.
an Arab comes and wants to buy my house,
Mhm.
Israeli Arab, and I say, I'm not selling it to
Mm-hmm.
you because you're an Arab, he can take me to the court.
Yes. So
This is a privilege.
it is just, again, the reason why we're bringing this up, it is important to understand that a lot of times people think about Israel as they have no rights, they have no, but there's many, the world is unfair. I feel like I need to, where's Noam? My son, it's kind of, everything is, it's not fair, it's not fair. The world, it really is unfair. Sometimes there's benefits that I get, right? Sometimes there's benefits that they get. I can't go to Bethlehem, right? Because I'm Israeli. I can have a Canadian passport, so I can bypass that, but Israelis can't go to Bethlehem, right? Just so we understand that there's reasons why these things happen. There's reasons why there's benefits. Now, there's going to be the other group, the one who live in the West Bank. Okay, they are under the Palestinian authorities, so they kind of have their own system. They're not a nation, they're not a state, but they are run by their people. I can't go to some of those places. I've been there with the military, right? So I've been to the West Bank with the military, so I kind of know how it's run. They are pretty miserable as well. They are controlled by their own people, and their own people get them into a mess. There's a lot of terrorism that happens from the West Bank, right? The settlements, right? So those who hear about settlements, the whole settlement thing is towns, Jewish towns who are in the West Bank, right? Sometimes, right, the reality is sometimes some of those settlements can be aggressive towards Arabs, right? It is a thing, right? But I lived really close to the settlements. It's small towns that are very peaceful, let's say. The third group are what we would say Gazans, or Arabs who live in Gaza. By far the worst standard of living, by far, right? The reason why I'm pointing it out is that sometimes people think, well, if we just gave them more land, or if we just gave them, they actually benefit hugely by working together. Most Israelis I would love to be able to go, to the Arab towns, if it was completely peaceful. Yeah, I would love to do business, would love to. But the reality is that it doesn't work out all that great. The West Bank and Gaza, a little bit, we're almost going to be done here. Okay? PLO is the organization that was started in 1964. The PLO really got the Arabs into a lot of mess. Okay? And they are in charge of a lot of the terrorism that was happening earlier on in Israel. What we have, if you've heard of the term intifada, there's a more modern, globalized intifada. That's kind of a slogan that's being put out there. Intifada, we do not want to globalize any intifada. In 1987, intifadas are, what's happened in Israel is when the group of people, for some reason, right, usually it's a religious thing, or a lot of times it's based on different lies, you have an uprising of thousands of Arabs that will sometimes murder, sometimes throw rocks, sometimes, there's lots of different things that happen with the intifadas. The second intifada is 2000. I was in Israel in the second intifada, and the intifadas they're actually more, I think it was more scary than some of the wars, because people don't realize how integrated Arab and Jewish life is in Israel. Right? So if you go to a dentist in Israel, there's a good chance that the hygienist is Arab, right? Or so a lot of times the doctor would be an Arab, or that we're integrated. Growing up, when I grew up in Israel, the boss, there was a lot of Arabs who were blowing themselves up in buses. All right, that was again, growing up, I knew that there's a chance that if I get on a bus, it might get blown up. Because of where I lived, I could see at nighttime sometimes like tracers. Tracers are like bullets that you can see at nighttime. The intifadas are really, they create a big mistrust between the group of people. Right? It's again because they come in, they build. A lot of the construction that happens in Israel happens by Arabs. Right? But when you have when you don't know if the person is going to stab you, right? It's a reality. Like when we were living there was a reality that if you go on a bus or if you might get stabbed by an Arab person. I had a friend that he was in the military, and he was walking in Jerusalem and he got stabbed by an Arab. Right? So whenever you have different things like that, it just causes both hatred, mistrust, and what happens a lot of times, the military, when they do go in to the West Bank, again, I was there, they have to go in with a very strong hand. And sometimes you can say it's too strong, right? Again, wars and how do you deal with these things are very complicated. Also, something that we see is that there have been a few attempts for peace. A few attempts. To the point where Israel was willing to give, I think it was close to 90% of whatever the Palestinian Authority wanted, but because they couldn't get the last little bit, they said, we're not going to do this. Right? So there's been many attempts to try and have peace. A lot of Israelis would, if you did a vote for two states, a lot of Israelis would vote for two states. Less now, after October 7th, right? But it is the West Bank and Gaza, the Arabs there. That is the biggest problem within Israel. The surrounding countries, we'll talk about it because they're a problem, but the West Bank and Gaza are the biggest problem. Okay. We've had with Gaza, so an example of, maybe we just we do two states, right? Again, if I could see peace, I would vote for two states. I have no problem. I would love to have an Arab neighbor if I knew that, it was fine. I would love to. And I think a lot of Israelis would be okay with that as well. Some do not, right? But the reality is, Gaza is a good example of what happens when Israel gives land and it goes bad. And 2007 is... 2005? Okay, yeah, you're right. Sorry, 2005. Yeah, 2000. We're going into wars pretty soon here. In 2005, Israel said, we will move all of the Jewish people out of the Gaza Strip. Right, so the Gaza Strip, again, it's a piece of land over there. And the military actually had to go in and they dragged Israelis out of there. Right? I remember the pictures really well. Dragged Israelis out of there because Israel was trying to, again, this was the second, after the Intifada, where lots of buses were blowing up and all that kind of stuff, figured we need to change, something needs to change. Said we'll give them the land. Israel moved out. And they had to put a fence around it, again, because we had some peace or some security. And I don't know if you remember. I remember when they had their elections, right? Hamas is the they are a terrorist organization who is in charge of Gaza. They apparently got voted in. When they won, and I remember this well, there's videos of them throwing people out of windows, the opposition. Throwing people out of windows.
Not Israelis?
No, Israelis already, the military already kicked them out, I guess you can say. Hamas took over. There's a really good book, if you're interested in this kind of, The Son of Hamas. Okay, The Son of Hamas is a very good book, written by an Arab Christian. Okay, he wasn't a Christian, he is the son of one of the founders of Hamas. Okay, so in this whole conflict right now, Hamas is the biggest player, right? Now, Hamas in the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority, they're not really friendly, which is causing them some problems. But Hamas gets control of Gaza in 2005, and we start having wars with Gaza. 2008, I was in the military in this one. 2008 was our first, the first interaction with the missiles from Gaza. Now, people don't understand, again, how small that is between Gaza and Tel Aviv. 2008, the first one, it was a short one because Israel went in there hard. 2012, 2014, 2021, to the point where we get to October 7th. Right, 2023, October 7th. People say October 7th didn't just start here or on October 7th. They are correct. It has started beforehand. But it is important to understand, and I'm not going to get into details about what happened. I'm not going to show any videos or any pictures because it's not, we don't need to see any of that. But me and Katie were in Israel on October 7th. I've been working with Jews for Jesus for 8 years. The last 5 have been in Israel with soldiers, Israeli soldiers. So on October 7th, it was a Saturday on the holiday of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. A lot of people were off, but I woke up early in the morning. I usually wake up early, had my coffee, had my phone on, and my WhatsApp group is just starting to go crazy. And I'm just like, in my soldier group. So I look and I see, which soldier is awake at, like Saturday, and because this is their only day off. And they say, oh, thank you, Hamas, for, waking up us early because they're shooting rockets. You think, okay, here we go again, a few rockets, not a big deal. Pretty soon you're starting to see videos of white pickups going into cities in southern Israel. And people are saying, oh, no, it's AI. Thinking this is AI. Pretty soon the news is showing, and I have a friend who is in that town. And he's like, no, this is happening. And in the meanwhile, his brother comes from Jerusalem with a car to vacate his family. They had to drive through fields because they saw those white trucks as they went and they killed 1,200 people. Again, I'm not going to get into, you guys have probably seen and heard, but we need to understand, people think that Israel is taking revenge on Gaza, on Hamas. There is an aspect of revenge, right? That is a human thing. But what people don't understand is that you can't live like this. You can't have a situation where every few years it just gets worse and worse. When 250 of your people get taken hostage, when you have people who are, we locked the door, I was grabbing a knife, we couldn't tell our kids what's happening. You can't live like that as a people. It is important to understand that because when you see what's happening in Gaza, right, it is sad. It's extremely sad what is happening there. But Israel has to defend itself. right? The whole idea of never again from the Holocaust, we can't let this happen again. What happened on October 7th was the worst thing that has happened to a civilian population in Israel since the Holocaust, right? The civilians were targeted. That was the civilians. So October 7th was the pinnacle of all of this, right? Which at October 7th, Hamas did their attack. Hezbollah is the terrorist organization that's in the north in Lebanon. They also, they kind of took over Lebanon. And they started attacking Israel. Israel it's still at war right now in Gaza and in Lebanon. The Houthim, right, the Houthis in Yemen, right, so all the way in the south. And right now, Iran is the biggest one.
Isn't Iran directing all the other ones?
So Iran is considered, they're arming and giving funds to all of them, right, to Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthim, different things in Iraq. And again, what I'm hoping to show is that there's reasons why different things happen. When Hamas shoots rockets, they will shoot it from a house, not their house. They'll go to your house. They'll shoot rockets. Then they have tunnels who they go to the hospital. They shoot rockets from there, right? Guess whose house is going to get blown up? His house, right? His house is going to get blown up. Hamas has a lot of, and Hezbollah, they want the people to get hurt. There's videos, unfortunately, of them having to cross a street. They run, they grab a kid because they know Israelis will not shoot, and they throw the kid afterwards just so they can cross. There's a huge interest. That's when I'm saying there's a lot of hands in this. This conflict continually gets worse and worse. Something has to change. Now, the beautiful thing is with Israel, and that is where I'm going to conclude, is that God has always been part of this equation. Right? There's nothing new under the moon, or it's under the sky. What is it? Under the sun. There you go. Under the sun. We're human. Right? And unfortunately, what we see is the ugliness of sin. I'm not here for us to say, take a stance here and there. That's up to you to decide. For me, even if you don't, I don't support everything that Israel does. I don't. Okay? I understand why Israel is doing what it's doing. For me, as a believer in Jesus, my hope is in Him. Right? For me, I was trying to, how do I deal with, again, October 7th happened. For me personally, how are you allowing this to happen? Again, the same question, where are you? A lot of times it is when we are challenged like this to such an extreme that how do I deal with this? Again, when life is good, you can say, oh yeah, I don't need God, right? Because everything is fine. But when you are pushed into such situations, you have a choice to make. Am I going to say, no, I don't, I'll just do it myself? And then there's no hope. Again, you look at the situation, how does it end? People ask me, how do you end it? I don't know. What I do know is that Israel needs Jesus. Right? The Prince of Peace. The Arabs need Jesus. Iran needs Jesus. Iraq needs Jesus. All of Lebanon, they need Jesus. They need freedom. Right? They need freedom from the oppression. They do need physical freedom. Right? I feel when I go to Israel, my mom is there. People ask me, is she safe? I mean, relatively yes, right? But I have a bomb shelter to go to. The people in Gaza have not, hopefully Israel doesn't attack here. Hopefully this Hamasnik doesn't shoot from here like a crazy guy and then maybe I get blown up. We know that we are to pray. A lot of people don't want to pray for Israel because they don't like what Israel is doing. Not understanding any of it. Again, I don't have to agree with everything and say, oh, no, I'm not praying because... No, we are called to pray. We're called to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. When it says pray for the peace of Jerusalem, it does not mean when they are good. Pray for them. I pray for Iran every day. I pray for the Arabs of Gaza every day because they need freedom. They need Jesus. And again, I don't know how this story ends. No one does. But I do know that God has always been with Israel. And again, it's not because we are special. It is an example for us as believers in Jesus to know that He will not leave us or forsake us. Right? That when we go through difficulties like October 7th and all that kind of stuff, hopefully not to that extreme, that we have someone to turn to. Right? That we can turn to God, and with all of our questions, right? I still have questions. What happened there? But I know He is good. I know that He takes care of us because He's always have. And I would encourage you, if you're interested, to take more time to study. A lot of times we are in a time of, I've watched a TikTok video, so I'm going to go and do. People chant things they have no idea. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. You're calling for genocide. Globalize the Intifada. You don't want that. Because after they're done with the Jewish person, guess who they're going for?
Christians.
Right? We are to pray. We are to come together and have hope. Right? There is hope. And if it's not in this life, it is in the next. Right? So pray for Israel. Pray for the churches there. Right? Pray that for missionaries in Iran, the Iranian church is growing. We need change there. And let us pray and let us educate ourselves to know what is happening and standing for God's truth and for freedom.